either today after the meeting or in the morning. And so if you have any questions or any other feedback, if you let us know by Thursday afternoon. If not, then they'll be posted as approved coming up on the 26th. And then the minutes for this week will be released on Friday. So watch your emails for that. Anything else for the committee at this point? Seeing none, we will open up our hearings. First up is a hearing on Senate Bill 38. And with more on an explanation of Senate Bill 38, Kyle Hamilton. Kyle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 38, as amended by Senate Committee, would create the Kansas Pesticide Waste Disposal Program and would allow up to $50,000 to be transferred annually from the existing Kansas Agricultural Remediation Fund to that new program. The bill is a Senate mirror of House Bill 2103, which the committee heard on January 28th, and then on February 11th was passed out of the House 123-0. House Bill 2103 received a hearing from the Senate Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources on March 11th. So this will all sound very familiar, but I'm just going to go through the provisions of the bill again. Section 1 would establish the new program, which would be administered by the Secretary of Agriculture for the collection and disposal of pesticide waste in the state. Section 2 of the bill would create a new fund to accompany the program. All money credited to the new fund would have to be used by the Secretary of Agriculture for the pesticide waste disposal program. Subsection B on page 1, line 22, states that the Kansas Agricultural Remediation Board may approve an annual transfer of monies from the existing remediation fund to the new Kansas Pesticide Waste Disposal Fund in an amount that shall not exceed $50,000 in any calendar year. Subsection C would require the Secretary to send the Remediation Board a report on or before January 1 of each year that would concern the expenditures made from the pesticide waste disposal program that year. Subsection D would ensure that any interest produced from the fund gets credited to the fund. Section 3 of the bill on page 2 would amend the Remediation Act's existing definitions section to add definitions for the terms Kansas Pesticide Waste Disposal Fund, Kansas Pesticide Waste Disposal Program, and then on page 3, starting on line 5, definitions for pesticide and pesticide waste would be inserted. The term pesticide waste would mean any pesticide that A, is not exempt from registration under a federal law called FIFRA, B, is not eligible for sale or distribution, and C, is not otherwise eligible for return or disposal. The rest of the definition of pesticide waste is a non-exhaustive list of examples of pesticides that fall under that definition. The Senate Standing Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources amended the first item of that list on page 3, line 14, by making a clarifying technical amendment. And that was the only change made by the Senate. Finally, Section 4 of the bill would amend the statute that states the purpose of the existing remediation reimbursement program. A line would be added to state that one purpose of the program is to provide funding to the new Kansas Pesticide Waste Disposal Program. Senate Bill 38 would become effective upon publication in the statute book on July 1, 2021. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kyle. Any questions for Kyle? Seeing none here online. Thank you. Up first, well, let's go with the proponents. Up first is Kelsey Olson, Deputy Secretary for the Kansas Department of Agriculture. Ms. Olson, thanks for coming back and welcome to committee. We didn't scare you away last time, huh?
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of this committee. Thank you again for having me to discuss this bill. As you'll see, my testimony is very similar to last time. I did just want to offer a slight update. As you may recall, I spoke about the second round of the grant program that we administered in November of 2020. There were two facilities or two sites that were cleaned up for just roughly around $7,000, and the total pounds cleaned up from that facility was 20,000 pounds. So in total, between the first round of the grant program in 2016 and then this most recent program, we've cleaned up almost 46,000 pounds of abandoned or unwanted pesticides in the state of Kansas. This program will continue to go forward, and we'll continue to be able to process applications with the approval of this bill. That's all I have for you at this time.
Any questions for Ms. Olson? Representative Newland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Kelsey. The only question I would have is, can a facility accept these pesticides from producers so they can bring them all together at one site and then have KDA remove those?
So anyone's eligible to make an application. There are some county facilities that will not accept them. If you're talking about, joining them in one combined location. But I don't know where it wouldn't work if one individual wanted to amass on the behalf of his neighbors a centralized location.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You bet. Okay, so you said in the second round, since I guess the update from last time, so the one cleanup was, the cost was $7,000, or you did two cleanups for a total of $7,000. So, and is that about the average, or is there such a thing as an average because of this?
The average, yeah, I wouldn't say that there's really an average. We've had some applications that have cost or been estimated in the $50,000 to $70,000 range, and then some are as small as $1,000. But most recently, the last two sites totaled just under $7,000 and equated to 20,000 pounds of pesticide products.
Okay. Other questions? Seeing none, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right, up next is proponent Randy Stuckey with the Grain and Feed and Ag Retailers. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Randy Stuckey, Kansas Grain and Feed Association and Kansas Agribusiness Retailers Association. And the committee has heard this bill before. This is the Senate's version of the bill. And it's a great bill. And the Senate, we'll just point out, did have a slight technical amendment on the bill that we believe benefited the bill, improved the bill, and we'd hope that this committee would consider that amendment that's in this bill and pass it out favorably, but certainly would stand for any questions to clarify at this time or when appropriate.
Okay, Mr. Stuckey, any questions for Randy? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. And also now up with the Kansas Cooperative Council, Shahira Stafford. Welcome to committee.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'm Shahira Stafford, and I'm here representing the Kansas Cooperative Council. And I'm not going to say anything that hasn't already been said by Randy and Kelsey. The KCC is interested in this bill because our ag cooperative members also pay into the ag remediation program, our annual fees. And so we do also agree that those dollars would be put to good use to continue this pesticide waste disposal program through the KDA. And then we do support the Senate's, we would call it friendly technical amendment that was made in the Senate committee. So I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Okay, any questions, Ms. Stafford? Seeing none. I shut my mic off. Seeing no questions. All right, and also in the proponents, written only, John Donnelly from the Kansas Farm Bureau, and then Josh Rowe from the Kansas Commodities, the commissions of the Kansas Commodities. As proponents, you should have those in the email. It looks like they went out just a little bit after noon today. Are there any other proponents wishing to speak on Senate Bill 38? Seeing or hearing none, I have no opponents Are there other opponents, either here or online? Seeing and hearing none, neutral? I hear no extra noise, so that means none. So we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 38. Now on to Senate Bill 143 as amended. With an explanation of that bill, once again, Kyle Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 143, as amended by Senate committee, would amend several public warehouse laws relating to grain storage. First, the bill addresses the definitions. The grain warehouse statutes are currently organized in a way that has a specific definition section, which can be found in section 1 of the bill. But then there are also several definitions spread out in other grain warehouse statutes. You can see these isolated definitions in the stricken language starting near the bottom of page 6 and on pages 7 and 8. The bill would place these isolated definitions into the main definition section and strike them from their current locations. There are no substantive changes to the definitions being moved, and the bill does not add any new definitions. This is just an organizational change to Kansas's grain storage statutes. Under current law, when an applicant submits a financial statement with their application, an audit is required to be submitted. Those audits can currently be conducted by an independent CPA or an independent public accountant. In section 2 of the bill, page 3, line 34, the bill would remove the option for an audit to be conducted by an independent public accountant. Only independent CPAs would be able to conduct such audits. The bill would also update fees relating to the grain warehouse program. There is a fee chart for storage fees in section 2, page 5 of the bill. The Secretary sets the functional unit fee and the storage fees in rules and regulations. But the functional unit fee cannot exceed $500 and the storage fees cannot exceed the fee amounts listed in the chart. Additionally, the bill would amend the examination period for each warehouse. Currently, the Secretary is required to examine each warehouse operated by a licensee at least once during a 12-month period. In section 2, page 6, line 13, the bill would extend that to an 18-month examination period. Lastly, the bill would repeal KSA 34-136, the provisions of which are already addressed by KSA 34-102. Senate Bill 143, as amended by Senate committee, would become effective upon publication in the statute book on July 1, 2021. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Kyle on this bill? Seeing none. I'm sorry, Representative Carlin. A bad eye, so sorry about that.
It's peripheral vision that you lack.
We'll call it that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You go pretty fast, Kyle, but I kept up pretty well. On page 8, are all those definitions that are strikeouts, if I didn't read it all? Is it all just a moving of definitions, or why was anything particularly struck, if not just definitions?
Correct. Those are all definitions that are now being moved up and consolidated into section 1 of the bill.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate that. Good. I believe that's where they belong. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Other questions? My glasses need to be clean. That's part of the problem. You're in a big splotch, I think, is what's going on there. So my wife's not here to take care of, she always goes, how can you see out of that? Now we know. Okay. Also want to make note, the fiscal note, as the program's currently been running in deficit mode, so the fiscal note shows that it would not, it's not showing up in the budget of that, but we'll talk more about that as we go, as we did before. So with that, let's get now to proponents. And first up is Jeff Vogel, Program Director for the Kansas Department of Agriculture. Mr. Vogel, thanks for coming to committee.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. I am Jeff Vogel. I serve as the Program Manager for Grain Warehouse Program with Kansas Department of Agriculture. Also in attendance today, of course, she was up here earlier, Kelsey Olson, Deputy Secretary. The Grain Warehouse Program doesn't very often come into the forefront of conversation, but does provide an important service to farmers. Because of that, I want to provide a little bit of background about the program and explains the current situation that we're in. The program came to the department in 1997 when the old Grain Warehouse Department was split up with the grain grading going private and the warehouse licensing program going to the department. We currently license 67 grain warehouses with over 550 million licensed storage bushels. With those licensing program, we ensure the financial bonding and insurance requirements of those licensees, conduct exams to ensure that the bin matches the books, and other statutory and regulatory requirements, so that basically we're ensuring that that grain warehouse is not selling farmer-owned grain. Fiscally, the program has struggled with budget shortfalls to fund the examiners needing to complete these examinations on a statutorily required frequency. The chart provided in our written testimony displays the revenues and expenses on a bar graph, and the line graph shows the fee fund balance as progressing through the last 10 fiscal years. During our current budgeting process, and for this year and upcoming fiscal years, it was determined our fee fund carryover would be exhausted by the end of fiscal year 2022 with current revenues and expenses. So with that, throughout the process, we were trying to determine a solution to these annual deficits. We consulted with stakeholders to look at all possible solutions. Even though there is a federal licensing program alternative to grain warehouses, several advantages to continuing the state grain warehouse program inspection were cited. Better customer service, KDA is willing to license bunker storage, and an examination process that provides the grain warehouse a complete measurement of their facility. With that understanding, we pursued a fee adjustment that would be done for the first time since 2004. Senate Bill 143 contains the agreed-to proposal with stakeholders that keeps the existing fee structure and only increases the bushel fee. This increase on the annual fees for licensed grain warehouses, no matter the configuration, size, and storage capacity, which in some of the other proposals we discussed as a group, somewhat decreased some and significantly increased others. So the total fee increase with the maximum adjustment that is provided in Senate Bill 143 is 38.5% across all grain warehouses, but could vary on an individual basis depending on their configuration. Table 1 of our written testimony shows the number of licensees, their size, and the fees collected under the Senate proposal of Senate Bill 143. Increasing the maximum fee will allow the program to generate enough revenue to eliminate the budget deficit, maintain 6 examiners in the field, and allow replacements of our aging vehicle fleet as needed. I do understand that this House Budget Committee, Agricultural and Natural Resource Budget Committee, discussed adding $60,000 of state general fund money to the program to allow the program to commit to which would allow the program to commit to a fully staff program sooner. But we do want to consider, at least have you guys consider, keeping the maximums the same, but we would just offset any sort of fee increase in regulation if there was SGF added to the program through the budgeting process. So with that being said, the revisor did mention several other updates, including the definitions. Furthermore, it removed the independent public accountant option to the audits and reviews we receive. This is an important function so that we would require only certified public accountant reports to make sure that those reports are accurate and are whole. And finally, it changes the interval to a maximum of 18 months. Our goal would be to continue to do examinations on a 12-month basis, but this change would allow us some flexibility when unexpected events happen like COVID-19. So with that, finally, the Senate did make one amendment to the bill to clarify that these licensing fees are done on an annual basis. That was done because we removed some annual references around the functional unit fee and the bushel fee because it was confusing because some places it said annual, some places it didn't. And rather than adding it in all the different places, it was just removed. And we relied on another statute, KSA 34230C, that states that all licenses expire after a year. But with that being said, the Senate did add an annually thereafter in that section of the bill, just to clarify that that licensing fee is done on an annual basis. So in closing, this will allow KDA to operate a grain warehouse program with a sustainable budget and protect farmers who deposit their grains in the public grain warehouses. I'm happy to stand for questions at the proper time.
All right. Questions, Mr. Vogel? Representative Newland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my understanding is this doesn't make any difference whether you have a grain in there and you're wanting a warehouse receipt on it to make a loan somewhere, or if it's just grain in storage or anything.
So part of the Grain Warehouse Act deals with grain warehouse receipts, and those, I guess, would be part of that function that a grain warehouse could provide to the farmer if they so choose to.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, I want to step back just a little bit. When you talked, and maybe my ranking can define this as well, you said that they proposed $60,000. We talked about it in the budget. So if that money stays in the budget, you're not going to raise fees? Is that, did I understand that correctly?
We would offset that amount of the total amount we needed to run the program without a deficit. So rather than needing $117,000 on an annual basis to run the program without a deficit and maintain 6 examiners, we would offset that amount in rule and regulation when we adopted those to actually raise the fees. I guess currently in this bill, it sets the maximum. We would adopt the proper amount in rule and regulation.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand that, because you said that, and then another little step back, that money would go to having another inspector. So that pool of money is going to. I don't want to necessarily get in the weeds, but I want to make sure I fully understand it. So if that $60,000 stays in the budget, that's going to pay for inspector, but that also work in the budget to where you would reduce any sort of fee increases. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is correct. What I'm trying to clarify is that the process of actually adopting increased fees would be a process that would actually take several years, and actually we worked out an agreement with the stakeholders and maybe splitting that up on a 2-year incremental basis. Adding $60,000 to the grain warehouse budget for the next fiscal year would allow us to move forward with hiring our 6th full-time examiners sooner, because we would have the additional revenue faster than if we waited for the adoption of rule and reg and the increased fees, and then realizing actually that when we license the individuals during that next year after that. So it could take 18 to 24 months.
You understand all that?
Okay.
Okay. So go ahead if you can remember what happened. I mean, I just want to make sure we all understand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand that, yes, we did provide $60,000 for a new inspector general, and that would stay in the budget. You don't want it taken out of the budget because of this.
We would offset any fee increase. We would.
You said that, but
Okay.
I don't know what you
Sure.
mean by that.
So as we talked with stakeholders about the program and running the program without a deficit, we had a target of $117,000 in additional revenue. If $60,000 of additional state general fund would be appropriated to the program, we would reduce the fee increase by $60,000 down to approximately
$57,000. Okay, that's what I hoped you were saying, and I just, offset and words like that. And rules and regs, those things get a little vague up here, but thank you, and I think this is
Okay.
Fine.
Okay. Any other questions? Everybody understand it? If Joe understands, I mean, if Representative Newland understands, then we all understand it, but no. Yes. Okay, okay. I will only go back to this apple one more time right now. So basically, and I go back to the appropriation. So the appropriation, in a sense, we speed up the process and then let the fee, the rules and regs to bring in any sort of a change in the fee. When that would happen, the extra or the additional inspector, the full inspector, in a sense, would already be in place.
Yes, we would be able to go through the budgeting process and essentially, as I mentioned earlier, the idea is our deficit, we are running the program with an annual deficit, and the fee fund balance would be exhausted in fiscal year '22. Increasing state general fund dollars would allow that balance to extend into future fiscal years.
Okay. Very good. Now, it only took 10 minutes out of our life to get there. Oh, no, you were fine. It's Monday, so that's my excuse. All right, Mr. Vogel, thank you. Any other questions? If not, yeah, Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure if you addressed this or not, but why is it necessary to hire an additional inspector?
For us to complete the examination cycle on our goal of a 12-month annual frequency, our program needs 6 examiners in the field to conduct those examination of the 67 grain warehouses is what we are proposing, yes. Thank you very much.
Up next, a proponent, Shahira Stafford from the Kansas Co-op Council. Or Cooperative Councils, we should say. So, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'm Shahira Stafford, representing the Kansas Cooperative Council. For those that maybe aren't aware, I know Brandy was here earlier this month, but the KCC is a statewide trade membership organization that represents all cooperatively structured businesses. The majority of our members are ag retail co-ops. Our ag retail co-ops often have grain storage operations and handle millions of bushels of grain each year. To protect our members' owners' commodities, cooperative grain elevators have always had the option to choose between whether to be licensed by the state through the Kansas Department of Agriculture or be federally licensed by the USDA. The members that choose to be licensed by the KDA, they do so because they appreciate the quality and accessibility of the customer service that they receive. So the KCC does support the KDA's proposal set forth in Senate Bill 143. We do understand that the increase in annual bushel capacity fees will help the KDA continue to run the state program, which will continue to give the option to our members. So we do support the continuation of both the state and the federal programs. 30 of the 67 state licensed elevators in Kansas are cooperatives, and so while we do support the bill, we do understand that an 80% hit to some of our members would be a big impact, which is why we also support the $60,000 appropriation in SGF fees to lessen the impact on the fees that our members will pay next fiscal year or the year after. And I believe that $60,000 is in both the Senate and the House budget bills currently making their way through the budget process. So thank you for letting me comment. We do ask for your support on Senate Bill 143, as well as when the time comes, the budgets with that extra SGF.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Stafford? Seeing none, so thank you. Up next, Randy Stuckey, Kansas Grain and Feed Association.
Very good. Yes, Mr. Chairman, Randy Stuckey, Kansas Grain and Feed Association. So we do represent the commercial grain elevators in the state of Kansas, 99% of the commercial grain storage in the state. And we have a lot of shared membership with the Kansas Cooperative Council, obviously. We don't have a whole lot more to say after what Mr. Vogel and Shahira both had to say on the bill. But we do stand as a proponent of this bill. And you say, well, why would the industry stand as a proponent to a fee increase? And the answer is that it's a program, the state Grain Warehouse Inspection Program is a program that many of our members choose to be licensed under rather than under the federal USDA program. And if we want to continue having a state program that's funded, we realize that we have to pay the bills. This program, if Mr. Vogel didn't say, is currently funded in 3 ways, and it's fees, which is the biggest part of the annual budget, and then there is I think a $200,000 SGF that's appropriated internally within KDA state general funds to the program, and then there's a fee fund, and it's that fee fund that I believe has about $80,000 left in it, and it will be exhausted. It looks like this next year. So because that fee fund is going to be exhausted, that was what brought us here today, is to find new revenue to help replace that fee fund with the $80,000. And the going forward is, as Mr. Vogel said, is $117,000 a year. That's the need. That's going to be the authority that's set out in this bill is for the KDA to be able to increase fees, if necessary, up to an additional $117,000 a year. Like I stated, currently this program is funded by SGF up to $200,000. We believe that's an appropriate use of SGF because this program serves a public good. It is the watchdog on the grain elevator industry for farmers and producers that store their grain, just like you do money in a bank. And so we think because that's an appropriate use of that SGF, then that's why we came forward and said, yes, we accept a reasonable fee increase going forward to fund this program, but we'd also ask the state to increase the SGF, and that's been appropriated currently in the budget for both the Senate Ways and Means and the House Appropriations Committee. That's $60,000. I get it when we're talking in the state, we're usually talking about hundreds of millions of dollars here and there, or billions-dollar budgets. Well, for us, we've got 67 companies, so that $117,000 it's a big chunk when you break it down per company. So that $60,000 additional SGF will go a long way, and we would appreciate your support on that bill when it comes out. But the balance then is the authority that KDA will have to increase fees through regulation to cover the difference. And with that, Mr. Chairman, not much more to say on the bill, but it's a small bill, but it's important to us and our industry. We appreciate, I appreciate KDA working with the industry up until, even as of last summer, they brought this issue to us and said, look, this is what we're looking at. How do you want to go forward? And we went through various, like 5 or 6 different iterations of how to assess these fees in a way that, frankly, would not drive our members off to the federal program. Because kind of like that insurance death spiral where if certain large numbers of the members started to leave to the federal program, there wouldn't be enough money in the system to continue the state program. So thank you to KDA for working with us, and we appreciate your support on this fee increase bill.
Questions for Mr. Stuckey? Representative Orr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Randy, thanks for your comments here. Are there any technology techniques that you have discussed that might reduce this as opposed to just hiring more inspectors? Is there anything on the horizon that you're looking at?
Well, I also represent the ethanol industry, so if the state were to run their vehicles on ethanol, we might save some money per gallon as they go around the state to reduce the cost. But it's kind of a KDA question, but I will say that this is a hands-on inspector, examiner service. And so they have to physically go around the state, look at the grain, measure the grain, do the accounting side to make sure that the grain that's stored mirrors up to what's in the books. So I don't know, Jeff might be able to speak to some technology investments that might make it easier on their folks, but there is a lot of physical movement around the state involved in those costs.
Okay, I understand that, but I'm wondering if it's time to start looking beyond the physical inspection with some type of technology? That was kind of my question, I guess. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Vogel, we'll have you, once we get done with our, what's the word? You know what I mean? Testimony, well, something like that. You know what I mean. Oklahoma lost in the tournament today. I'm a little excited. I'm happy. Good. You know, I mean, K-State can't be there. Why should Oklahoma, you know? So we'll have you answer that question. So yeah, that's it. Any other questions, Mr. Stuckey? Just to refresh us, you talked a little bit about possible some moving to the federal program. What if there is a increase? What do we, as far as comparable dollars from, say, the state? What it would cost a grain elevator, licensed grain elevator, to be part of the state program versus the federal?
So it's kind of hard to measure because it's not a direct one-for-one, but on the per bushel fees, we were very careful when working with KDA to make sure that however we increased this fee schedule, it didn't push one member, one elevator too far one way or the other. So we, with this graduated increase, we intend to stay under the USDA fee schedule, but just barely. And that was purposeful. We didn't want to push any one sized elevator over that line to drive them over into away from the state program. And then there's not enough money in the system to continue it.
Very good. Other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Up next is conferees. That was a word I was thinking of, conferees. So John Donnelly from Kansas Farm Bureau. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought maybe you were looking for final esteemed conferee,
well,
but those words just weren't quite going to come out of your mouth.
I'm still looking. Maybe next time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I am John Donnelly. I'm here today on behalf of Kansas Farm Bureau. I will be very brief. I know you've seen lots of written testimony from me this year. I wanted to come up here. I thought this was a bill that's important to hear from the farmers and ranchers in the state of Kansas. This is like, there's certain things that flow downhill. Fees are included and often thought of in the same light. We don't like them. We don't like fees, we don't like taxes, but we also recognize that this is an extremely important program, and this is a well-balanced proposal that the department and the Grain and Feed Association and Co-op Council have brought forward that we are fully supportive of. We think the state program is a very well-administered program, and we wanted to make sure that the committee understood the support that we have from the farmers and ranchers in the state. This program is extremely important to protect farmers and ranchers. This is a commercial paper issue if you want to get down to into the real weeds on this and lawyer talk, but we need to have inspections that we can trust, and we need to be able to support those types of programs. We also would encourage state general fund support, continued state general fund support, and if there's more there, we can always use it and keep the fees down, but we think this is important legislation, so I'll stand for questions.
All right, any questions for Mr. Donnelly?
Thank you.
Thank you. Call Jeff Vogel back. Representative Orr, you want to ask your question again, or do you understand what he?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes,
okay.
Unless you would like to. Okay. Thank you. And so our program looked at many different efficiencies ahead of this discussion we had with stakeholders. We have implemented the use of laser measuring devices when necessary. We can use those to calculate some advanced measurements, degrees of angles and so forth. And we recently too upgraded our exam software so that we can utilize these measurements in a way that helps us estimate the amount of grain in a grain bin without having to do some manual complex equations. And so that certainly has saved us some time, but that can only gain us so much efficiency, especially when Representative Fairchild mentioned it earlier. Why do we need 6 grain examiners? I forgot to mention some of our grain warehouses are so large and cover such a large distance for us to conduct that examination in a reasonable amount of time, 2, 3, 4 weeks sometimes. We have to have 6 grain examiners in that facility through that time because measuring may take us 2 weeks to travel to 50, 60 functional units, plus the time in the office to actually conduct the audit portion. And so combining all those variables, that 6 examiners is what we have tried to fund and hire, and that's what we feel like we need to continue to do the examination process as we have been doing it, providing that service to the grain industry and the farmers.
Yeah, thank you for that. You provide a lot of information for the bankers for warehouse receipts and stuff. What's their fee on this?
For the grain warehouse, the bankers, or just them issuing grain warehouse receipts?
Both.
So grain warehouse receipts, we do no longer issue paper grain warehouse receipts in the state. We do everything electronically, and that is done through a third-party vendor called eGrain. And so those fees are paid by the grain warehouse to use that service through eGrain. We provide an administrative oversight feature on that. But beyond that, I do not know of any other fees associated with that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anything else? That probably didn't get you answered everything you wanted, wasn't it? Other questions? Representative Newland.
Okay, so if I request a warehouse receipt on 100,000 bushel of corn then, and you send it to, if I want a warehouse receipt for FSA, then you can just send that directly to them, and that's in the records then.
So I am not extremely familiar, although I could look it up, how it works on the grain warehouse side, the licensee side, but my understanding all of that is conducted electronically and shared electronically. We use eGrain to administrate grain warehouse numbers so that there are unique numbers when those are issued, and we conduct the audits of that every time we do an examination. We check grain warehouse receipts. But on the grain warehouse side and the lender side, I'm not exactly certain, but I can get some information and try to get it back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Carnan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeff, when you were in the budget committee, or when we put the $60,000 in, I believe it was you, but we did ask, how long does it take to do an inspection? You just discussed it, but it was in a broader answer. And so did you say that you might have 6 inspectors on one at the same time, and it might be 3 to 4 weeks?
So we have several large grain warehouses, one over 100 million bushels of storage, close to 70 functional units. Another one that's slightly underneath that, and it kind of trails down to that. Those units those grain warehouses take a lot of time for us to conduct an examination, 3, 4 weeks, potentially depending on the circumstances, to conduct that. But we do have a large number of small grain warehouses that are under 1 million bushels that could be done in 1 to 2 days, depending on how much grain they have stored, what are the condition of the books, et cetera. So it varies tremendously depending on the size of the grain warehouse.
And I just wanted to be sure that the representative had his question answered about that, because I knew we had discussed it in budget committee. Also, is it time sensitive? Do you have to do it within a time frame? So that it's when the grain is such and such freshness? Whatever.
So to answer your question about timeliness, we want to conduct that examination as quickly as possible, because the term we use is cutoff. When we have a cutoff and we look at their position, we always have to back calculate that, even though there are trucks and trains coming in and out of facilities, to go back to that original date. And so the quicker we do that, the less work it is for us to bring the numbers back into alignment. So to answer your question, the quicker we can do it, the better it is for us in the facility because they don't have to provide us as many inbound and outbound tickets to do that adjustment. And then beyond that, we do check grain. We do have, I guess there's one statute that refers to the condition of the grain, but that if there's a question on that, we would pull in the Kansas Grain Inspection Service to conduct an examination and grading of that grain if it was in question. But beyond that, there isn't specifically a reason we have to be quick because of the condition of the grain.
So basically, can you briefly tell me what you're looking for when you inspect? Because I have an idea, but I don't know.
When we conduct, there's two different phases of an examination. One is actually measuring the grain that is in the facility and basing that what is in the books and the quantity of it, yes. And so we are going and actually physically measuring each grain bin, whether there's grain in it or not, and coming up with a total. We compare that to what they have on the books, and if it doesn't match, we will answer their questions, or potentially they'll have to make an adjustment so that it does match. Then beyond that, we make sure there's several different statutory requirements. I mentioned grain warehouse receipts. We make sure that they are not ever in a short position, meaning that they're selling farmer-owned grain, that they have enough company-owned grain so that there's never a situation where they're short. And several other different factors, including reviewing contracts to make sure those contracts are in order, and et cetera. There's a whole flow to the process, but really we're focused on making sure from a grain perspective that the books match what's in the bin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as a gentle lady farmer, I appreciate that because I would have no idea. Thank you.
All right, any other questions, Mr. Vogel? Thank you again for coming and answering those again. Any other proponents for Senate Bill 143? Seeing or hearing none. I have no opponents or neutral. Anyone else online or here wanting to testify is no opponent or neutral? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 143. Now, hearing on the Senate Bill 160 will convene. And Kyle, give us the breakdown of what this is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 160 would update the reference to the guidelines of the American Fisheries Society in Kansas's commercialization of wildlife statute. So I'm going to just briefly describe the current mechanism that's in place in this statute and then discuss the actual change that's being made. The bill is just making a pretty small change. So under KSA 2020 sub 321005, the commercialization of wildlife as described in subsection A is illegal. Subsection F specifically clarifies that the provisions of the statute shall apply only to wildlife illegally harvested and possessed by any person having actual knowledge that such wildlife was illegally harvested. Section B lists the wildlife protected under the statute. Each listed category of animal has a minimum value assigned to it. Under subsection D, commercialization of wildlife having an aggregate value of $1,000 or more is a severity level 10 non-person felony. Commercialization of wildlife having an aggregate value of less than $1,000 is a Class A non-person misdemeanor. Additionally, under subsection E2, a court convicting a person under the statute may order restitution to be paid to the Kansas Department of Wildlife Parks and Tourism for the wildlife taken. Such restitution is in an amount not less than the aggregate value of the wildlife. So Senate Bill 160 would amend the minimum value that's assigned to fish and mussels. The current value for each species is listed in the monetary values of freshwater fish or mussels and fish kill counting guidelines of the American Fisheries Society, special publication number 30. And what the bill would do is it would just amend that citation to this publication to refer to special publication number 35 instead of 30. Senate Bill 160 would become effective upon publication in the statute book on July 1, 2021. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Hamilton? Seeing none, thank you. We will now open for conferees, and we have one as a proponent, Brad Lovelace, the Secretary of Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks and Tourism. Welcome back, Mr. Secretary. Sorry you had to wait so long, but
that's all right. It's all interesting. Thank you, Chairman Rogers and members of the committee. It's good to see you all again. I am here seeking your support of Senate Bill 160. I am Brad Lovelace, Secretary, Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks and Tourism. As Kyle mentioned, this bill pertains to wildlife that is illegally commercialized. The provisions of this bill deal with updating the valuation process for illegally commercialized wildlife. The American Fisheries Society publishes guidelines for determining monetary restitution for values for fish and mussels that are illegally taken. And so this does focus on commercialization. The current guideline in statute uses special publication number 30 that was enacted in 2003, and the department's requesting to change to special publication number 35 that was produced in 2017. Importantly, as we look at the values that have changed, if you noticed in my testimony, as you'd expect, the value for most of this wildlife has increased with time. It's more expensive to replace, but some species like walleye, which is referenced in my testimony, has actually gone down. We're getting better at producing it for less, and so the cost can go either way. So this just means a more accurate representation of the value to replace those wildlife. The department appreciates the opportunity to address the committee and your support of this bill. Thank you.
any questions for Secretary Lovelace? I think you're the only one, but so, okay, so this is really just updating the, or really making any change on just getting us in line with not necessarily industry standards, but what any other state your peers are doing.
Exactly
correct?
Right. It's a national standard. You're correct.
National standard. That's
yeah.
it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Representative Orr.
Thank you, Secretary. How big a problem is this, and where do you encounter these type of problems at, the illegal taking?
Yeah, it's not very big. It used to be more of a problem with mussels. That was kind of what triggered a lot of this in terms of commercialization. In other places in the regulations, it references if you lose species, like if I released chemical from my business and we lost a lot of these, that is more often how it's used, but commercialization is not very frequent these days.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Other questions? Any online? I think there's one or two, I think. So, all right. Mr. Secretary, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And any other opponents or neutral testimony? I don't have anyone down listed. Seeing or hearing none, we close the hearing on Senate Bill 160. All right, committee, bring all your information you need tomorrow. A computer if you want. We will be, probably won't take that long. We're going to be working all the bills from Friday through today, or Thursday, or Wednesday, I'm sorry. We were off Thursday and Friday, won't we? So Senate Bill 89, that's exempting the transport of ag forage commodities from secured load, the silage bill as we call it. Senate Bill 142, the Coast Guard approved personal flotation devices prescribed by Secretary of Wildlife. House Bill 2392, that's the lifetime combination fishing, hunting, and harvesting license for any Kansas Air or Army National Guard veteran. Senate Bill 38, establishing the Kansas Pesticide Waste Disposal Program, and then Senate Bill 143 and 160. We just heard those last three today. So those are ones that could see final action. And so it'll be the discretion of the chair how we move forward tomorrow with those. And then if they pass out favorably, if one of you wants to carry them on the floor, let me or ranking or vice chair know, and we will get you on the list. So anything else for the good of the cause? A reminder, we will have a dinner, committee dinner Wednesday evening at the Big Country Club, sponsored by the Farm Bureau. So with that, we are adjourned.